Oh, welcome back. I'm going to continue on talking about trusts and going to look at the trust deed a little bit more closely this time. So we started last session just looking at a simple trust where Sally decided to go to Japan, gave Tom a sum of money held in trust for the purposes of the children, which were very simple purposes of accommodation, house, necessities, school, and sports. And that raises quite a lot of issues for Sally and the trust deed. Particularly, what do we put in the trust deed? Now here, you need to think about trusts in the way we discuss partnership agreements and constitutions. While there are certain things we must have in a partnership agreement by default, we can also change a lot of these rules. So where we can change the law, we should think about how do we change it to achieve our objectives. So we changed a lot of rules in partnership agreement, and we also changed a number of rules for the company constitution, and we added some extras which weren't in the Act. In the same way, we can use a trust deed as a tool for particular purposes, here looking after the children. But what else do we need to do? For example, can we change the trustees or the beneficiaries? Can Sally be a trustee? What are the powers we should put in there? How do the trustees exercise that? Should they be paid? What are their duties? How do they actually have to act as a trustee? Can we sue them if they don't do it properly? And what about making distributions? Now, let's go through and have a look at our example a little more closely. So we had Tom sitting in there. Now, what if Tom isn't a very good trustee and Tom thinks, oh, the kids need a house because I need a house. The kids need a boat because they need sports. So the trust deed actually allowed these things specifically, if you recall. Now, what that's going to do is, of course, make this shrink rather badly. Can we get rid of Tom? Can we just chuck Tom out and maybe put Slick here in as the new trustee to act a little bit more professionally? That might be desirable. The other thing is, can we treat these people separately or differently? So the money starts out quite nice, and what if a lot of it's given to Betty, a little bit's given to Bobby, and poor old Billy's getting nothing? Is that possible? Now the answer to that is no, unless they are discretionary beneficiaries, which is a type of beneficiary where the trustee has the ability to decide, well, I give some to this person, nothing to this person. Normally, they have to treat them equally, but if we have that power, we can treat them differently. But the way our trust is currently set up, and the way that Sally's done it, we can't put Slick in there. We've got to leave Tom in there because he's the trustee. We haven't made him haven't given any discretionary beneficiaries, so he can't do this kind of thing. But he can go and buy things which he considers to be reasonably prudent in the interests of the beneficiaries. And over time, this is going to go down. Of course, it is going to go down, but the question is how quickly. So what we need to think about was what should have been in this trust deed. If we go to a typical trust deed, and we'll just get rid of that. This is the trust deed from Canvas, and we're going to go through and just pick out a few of the key sections that help us here. So we've changed it to being Sally Okinawa as the settlor and Tom Brown the trustee. And we described it as a Sally Okinawa family trust. And that's quite important to have a name. So we properly described the parties, Sally Okinawa as a karate instructor of Honua, and Tom Brown's an artist of Remuera. So in our agreement, the trust deed, we set out what's happened. So the settlor has cause to be paid, and here, the sum of $150,000, which is paid and acknowledged to have been paid. And you'll notice here it says to be held upon trusts, upon the trusts and with the powers herein. So the trusts, as we talked about, were the terms of the trust deed, the things that have been agreed to. Now, let's go further down. So the trustees consented to become the trustees. That's important. And we've described the trust fund as $150,000. And you'll notice it also says held along any further property, right? Any further property, real or personal, hereafter acquired by the trustees from any source whatsoever. So the trustees could use the money to buy property like the boat that Tom just bought, or they could borrow money from the bank, or it could be gifted to them by somebody else. However they acquire money as trustees or property, it becomes trust property. Now, we've got a term in here called the vesting date. Trusts cannot live forever. There has to be a termination of them, and it's covered by the Perpetuities Act. It's basically around 80 years, but that's very likely to be changed to 150 in the revision of this act coming up shortly, of this law, sorry. Now, you also notice here we've got final beneficiaries. So they have to be named as the people who get the money when the trust ends. And then we create these discretionary beneficiaries, which are really the important part of a trust deed as far as the practical issue of giving people money is concerned. And it includes the settlor. So now Sally can receive a benefit under this trust. Any of her children, that's the 3 children, and any further children, we don't need to describe them by name. The law requires trusts to be certain. There are 3 certainties: that you intend to trust, that the property is clearly described, and thirdly, the beneficiaries are identifiable. And we can do that by their names, or we can use a class of people. Any parent, wife, child, and any other person. So we can nominate additional people and add them in. Okay, so moving through this, we're going to call it the Sally Okinoa Family Trust, which we need in case we want to open up bank accounts. We need to call it something. And then we set out a bunch of powers. So anything for the maintenance, personal support, comfort, education, advancement. So it's very, very wide powers given to the trustees. Moving through here, you'll see that they can acquire, act in capacity in companies. We're going to give them that power. And in 15, you'll see here the power of appointment of new trustees is vested in the settlor. So Sally is giving her the power, herself the power to appoint trustees. And further up, you'll also notice she has the power here to remove by notice all or any of the trustees without assigning any reason. So just arbitrarily say you're fired. So she can remove Tom and put in her friend Slick. The additional powers of the person who can appoint are set out here. And you'll notice one of them is to appoint yourself. So when she comes back from Japan, she could fire Tom as the trustee and appoint herself. And that would be very appropriate for the situation we've described. Okay, and then you'll notice if you read through this, we have a lot of different powers: buying shares, stocks, bonds, borrowing money, selling any part of a real or personal property. So can buy and sell houses, can lease property, carry on any business. So this could be used for carrying on business, which means it's not just a family trust, it could be a business trust, but it's not a trading trust. So we'll leave that definition till we get to trading trusts. To do all such things necessary in the interest of the beneficiaries. So that's extending the powers a little more. Borrow monies on mortgage from a bank overdraft. We'll talk about that in creditors. And then further down, as we go through a long list of powers, which is normally quite typical, we have an investment decision clause, which is trying to exclude the liability of trustees for not acting prudently. And then we execute this in the form of a deed. So that simply means it's signed by Sally Okinoa as settlor in the presence of, and we have witness. And the same with Tom as trustee, signed and witnessed. Now, if we go back to our questions, we can answer most of them. So we know what's in it. What do we need to put in it? Can we change them and the beneficiaries? Yes, if the power's in there. Can she be a trustee or beneficiary? Again, if the power's in there. I'll talk about the Trustees Act shortly in another video. How do trustees exercise their powers? They do so by resolution. Are trustees paid for their work? Now, in that deed, there is a provision in there saying that trustees who are professional can be paid for their work. Going through here. So any trustee or advisory trustee being a solicitor, accountant, or a person in a profession shall be entitled to be paid for their actions, but no one else is entitled to be paid. This is very much like in the partnership law, where we know partners can't be paid for their work unless it's in the partnership agreement. In the same way, in trusts, a trustee cannot be paid unless there is a charging provision, which is quite normal for professional trustees. Duties we'll talk about in the Trustees Act coverage, and making distributions, we know that that's possible if we have discretionary beneficiaries and the right to pay them differently. And the clause in the trust deed you'll find is very clear, saying each can be treated and paid separate amounts of money or separate benefits. So we'll stop here and we'll just come back to some of the Trustees Act and beneficiary issues in the next video. So we'll finish with a nice picture of a pigeon who flew past my deck. So I shot him with my camera.